Before the rising of the sun, Eärendil slew Ancalagon the Black, the mightiest of the dragon host, and cast him from the sky. And he fell upon the towers of Thangorodrim, and they were broken in his ruin. That is the only quote from the actual text of the Silmarillion about Ancalagon the Black, other than in the notes at the back of the book and mentionings in other texts. But that alone might be all we need to decipher whether or not Ancalagon the Black is the greatest dragon in all of fiction. Hey everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Beleriand. Thank you all for joining me in this dragon comparison as we look at Ancalagon against the other mightiest dragons of fiction, mythology, fantasy, video games, all of it, to see if Ancalagon truly is the greatest. Let's begin our tale. Alright, so first, let's get into some lore about Ancalagon. Like I said before, we have very little to go on about this character, which is why I have not made a personal epic character history about him yet. Or probably won't. Honestly, this will probably be the closest thing to it. We know that he is the mightiest winged dragon that Morgoth had created, being unleashed for the War of Wrath at the end of the First Age. He is slain by Eärendil with the aid of the great eagles in the skies, and his death brings about the destruction of the volcanoes of Thangorodrim. Depending on the language, it means something different in Ancalagon, but in Sindarin it most closely means jaws rushing or rushing jaws. They fought for 24 hours before he fell, and again, his defeat nearly ruined all of Morgoth's abode. However strong he was, in The Lord of the Rings, Gandalf mentions that in the Third Age, not even his fire would have been powerful enough to destroy the One Ring, which is actually really interesting. We might wonder what exactly he and the other winged dragons were in fact bred for. Perhaps they were made explicitly for the War of Wrath, or maybe Morgoth had some other plan and design for them, originally wanting them to find hidden elven abodes, or to slay the eagles, or something entirely different. Now, with all of that said, Ancalagon was absolutely massive if his fall destroyed mountains. He was obviously quite powerful physically, but maybe not so metaphysically, or even through his dragon fire, compared to potentially other dragons in other works. Now, what do I mean by not metaphysically powerful? Well, Ancalagon the Black was a force that could wipe out armies surely, but holy power, such as that of Eärendil, as imbued to him through the intervention of the Valar, with the aid of Manwë's own messengers, they were able to bring Ancalagon low, after, honestly, only a 24-hour fight. Obviously, a long fight, but still it was one battle and this dragon was brought low. Therefore, it is not as though he was strong enough to threaten the Valar himself, or Ilúvatar, or the Flame Imperishable, anything like that. We must keep that all in mind as we go through these comparisons. Alright, let's jump in and compare our dragon here to some others from fiction, fantasy, video games, and mythology. Obviously, there are so many dragons out there, I won't mention every powerful dragon here. I also don't know them all. But I will use the ones that I can come up with to get a better sense of Ancalagon's power. Skipping any other dragon from Tolkien's works, because it definitely seems like Ancalagon had them all beat, we're going to go to one that is actually quite similar to Ancalagon, both in his description and his just immense might. Balerion the Black Dread, from A Song of Ice and Fire from Game of Thrones. So this was the largest Targaryen dragon ever recorded. Wingspan had, shadowed entire towns, and this was what Aegon the Conqueror used to conquer Westeros in that lore. His dragonfire was actually able to melt a castle named Harrenhal, which was like a bunch of stone towers with a blast, and lived for around 200 years. Definitely this is one where, again, by Westeros standards, by Game of Thrones standards, this creature was crazy. And obviously Daenerys' dragons, we'll see what George R. R. Martin comes up with them, if they'll be greater, if any of them will be, anything like that. But, assuming that Balerion the Black Dread is the greatest dragon in that universe, Ancalagon still hasn't beat, right? So this was a large dragon, of course, but Ancalagon, I believe, was still far, far bigger. Right? I mean, there was still a conquest that Aegon had to go on. I imagine with something like Ancalagon, something that's so gargantuan that it could probably raise, not just castles, but whole cities, whole provinces to the ground. Ancalagon definitely has Balerion beat by quite a bit, I would say, too. it says a lot about Eärendil and the Eagles' strength, that they were able to bring him down only 24 hours of a fight, because if Ancalagon had been unleashed upon Beleriand, upon Middle-earth, especially earlier in the First Age, which again, I wonder if that was a part of Morgoth's plan, he absolutely could have destroyed places like Gondolin, places like Nargothrond, probably by himself, or at least close to. Putting Beleriand aside now, another one that my fiancé actually mentioned to me was Shrukin from the Aragon series, a series of books about different dragons. I haven't personally read it, but many people that I know have. From what I can tell about this dragon, the largest dragon in that fiction, absolutely massive size, has some magical affinity, which we'll come back to in a second, but definitely power, strength, all of that kind of stuff. However, it seems like the writer in Aragon's lore, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but it seems that the writers of the dragons also kind of change how the dragons are, or their abilities and so forth. So it seems that Shrukin had a powerful writer. But again, looking at just Ancalagon, the two against each other, especially if, getting rid of a rider, because Ancalagon didn't have one that we know of. It seems like Ancalagon definitely wins this physically, but again, depending on the amount of magic that this dragon's able to wield, that would be a closer fight for sure. All right, bringing in some mythology, and shout out to our Masters of Mythology channel. It's kind of a second channel where I post other videos about mythology from time to time. Check that out if you're interested. Shout out to that channel because we're going to talk about Jormungandr next, the world serpent from Norse mythology. So, Ancalagon's massive. Jormungandr actually has him beat, though, because this world serpent wraps around the entirety of Midgard, of the world. Jormungandr, he kills Thor and is killed by Thor, the Norse god of thunder, of course. He is someone, due to his sheer physical size and all of that would probably give Ancalagon, that's probably very close to Ancalagon's power, if not greater, honestly, than Ancalagon the Black. So Jormungandr actually, in terms of, if you consider that to be a dragon, not a winged dragon, but honestly is so large that it doesn't need to be. Let's leave it at that, I guess. Definitely size-wise, Jormungandr might be able to take down Ancalagon. All right, transitioning now to Warcraft with Deathwing. This is an interesting one because it looks like, based on the research that I've played a little bit of Warcraft, but I'm not too well versed in it. But from my research here, it looks like this dragon could cause giant tectonic upheavals, such as the Cataclysm, was held together by plates, and was empowered by titans and corrupted by old gods. So it looks like, because it could cause world-ending events and destruction, it's probably right up there with Ancalagon. Yeah, based on what I can tell, Ancalagon still dwarfs this dragon with his just gargantuan, absolutely giant gargantuan size. It's still worth mentioning that the magic power aspect has a part to play in this, that Ancalagon, as far as we know, isn't able to really quite match. So I've already alluded to this, but here's kind of the interesting thing, based on what we know of Ancalagon the Black. Incredibly physically mighty and powerful, but again, metaphysically, magically, not quite there. Now, let's even attribute the fact that Beleriand itself was destroyed after the War of Wrath. Let's in large part say that was because of Ancalagon's sheer size. That still adds a lot, but again, there are other dragons that when they become more like something else, Ancalagon doesn't really have anything on them. So, because I don't know a lot of these too well, I'm just going to kind of honorably mention them. But I think there are actually a lot of dragons that are more powerful than Ancalagon is when it comes to the more metaphysical, godly side of things. So, there's Akatosh, the dragon time god in the Elder Scrolls. Something like that would beat Ancalagon, I think, in any metaphysical fight where he could use more of his powers. There's also Alduin, which, again, I think in his regular form, the one we see in Skyrim, Ancalagon easily beats Alduin. But in his more prophetic form, the one that devours the world, he devours the world, so Alduin could beat Ancalagon there. There's Super Shenron from Dragon Ball, which apparently can grant any wish, or rewrite existence. There's Io from D&D, which is like the creator god of dragonkind. And again, it's a dragon, but exists more like a god, such as Tiamat as well, the five-headed goddess of evil dragons, right? And each head had a destructive element. As far as I know, Ancalagon could only breathe fire. But again, that against a head that could breathe ice, and a head that could breathe like acid and fire, like, that would probably be quite challenging for Ancalagon. There's also King Ghidorah, hopefully I pronounced that right, from Monsterverse, like absolutely giant, could make superstorms across continents by flying, could overpower Godzilla, maybe still not large enough from Ancalagon, so maybe that's more Ancalagon's level, but still. When we start to bring in these other powers and these other magics, Ancalagon doesn't really have a lot to go off of. Now, there are some mythical creatures, maybe like Nidhogg from Norse mythology, which is more like a corpse dragon that flies after Ragnarok. Perhaps Ancalagon could take something like that. I'm not sure to the level of magical powers that Nidhogg has. But yeah, so obviously there are tons more dragons out there for Ancalagon to be compared to. So let me know what else would be worth comparing Ancalagon to in the comments below. But all of this leads me to this conclusion. I think on a pure, raw, physical level, if we kind of put godly powers and ascension and stuff aside, I think Ancalagon is an absolute beast and close to the most powerful in fiction. Again, maybe something like Jormungandr might have him beat, but honestly, Ancalagon, when we look at most fictional books, Ancalagon is probably the greatest dragon to exist in these fictional worlds. However, when magic and metaphysics or godly powers are introduced, which, because dragons are mythic creatures, those often are, that just changes it entirely. Ancalagon's such a physical beast, but I think anything more, as it was with Eärendil and the Eagles of Manwë, he doesn't stand much of a chance from what I can tell. And I think Eärendil used a lot of that more divine power from the Silmaril, from the Valar, his flying ship Vingalot. He was probably able to use a lot of that stuff to help take down this mighty, mighty dragon. So I wonder what Ancalagon was originally bred for. Perhaps it just was the War of Wrath, and maybe I'm missing something in the lore there. But I wonder if Morgoth had some other original design for him that he would have excelled at, but thankfully the host of the Valar and the rest were there to, help take him down, force him out of hiding, and so forth. So there we have it. From this tale, we see that there is more to power than what meets the eye. Be wary of what other strengths may lie hidden. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on Ancalagon and whether or not he is the greatest dragon in fiction in the comments below. If you would like to support the channel, we have a partnership with Mythologie Candles through the link below. Use code Men of the West for 10% off of that first order, and check out Castle Con's Lord of the Rings replicas and use the code WEST at checkout, and please check out our merch. Join our memberships and Patreon for access to our Discord server and our monthly podcast, and take a look again at Masters of Mythology, our second channel on myths and legends. Thanks to our Valor Tier patrons and YouTube members, Joby Weasel, Ed Patterson, ComicNut64, Zoomi, and Peter Sheppard. Thank you all so much for keeping the channel going. Don't forget to subscribe to join the Men of the West, and my friends, thank you all for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.